News Network, as well as Sports Illustrated. What's going on, John?
Hey, how's it going? Trying to recover as best as possible. That's right.
Well, tell me how you do it. I need to know.
Well, I'll tell you, because the past couple nights, I don't think I've been to bed until 2 with all this draft coverage. So thankfully, I have a supportive wife who let me sleep till about 8 this morning. But last night, I think I got in bed about 10. Missed the Jameis news a little bit this morning. So thankfully, Bob picked up the slack for us. So, but, just stuff like that happens. But been able to recover, and I'm good to go now.
Yeah. And it's been an eventful day. I think it's more exciting today than the draft, to be honest.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. And we have Bob Rose of the Bayou Blitz, as well as the Sports Saints News Network on Sports Illustrated. What's going on, Bob?
Not much, Kyle, John, Brendan. I hope you guys are all doing well, too. For everybody just tuning in at the moment, we thank you for your support, not only tonight, but through the draft. And like you, John, I have a very supportive wife-to-be. She would have let me sleep, and it was my own insomnia that got me up and allowed me to see the Jameis Winston news. So I was happy. I was happy to get on it, and like you guys said, today was as exciting and as eventful as any of the 3 days of the draft.
Yeah, pretty much, man. And I thought we did a good job covering. If you guys have any questions or comments, go ahead and list them in the comment section. We will get to them, as well as if you would like to call into the show tonight, I'm going to open up the phone lines at 504-533-8444 in around 15 minutes. So we will let you guys know about that. And we have Brendan Borland. What's going on, B?
Hey, nothing much. I think just like everybody else was able to catch up on a little bit of sleep today. So that's good. But obviously the Jameis news, I think John and I both said we woke up to some news today.
Yeah,
a little bit.
And as soon as I woke up and I saw Bob, I was like, "What the Jameis? We got what?" So I had to give him a call, man. We had an early morning chat. So, but guys, look, if you have not been around, Jameis Winston is due to sign. Everything hasn't been completed as of yet, but Taysom Hill has signed his contract with the New Orleans Saints, and we'll talk a little bit about both of those guys in the Saints NFL draft as well. So first things first, guys, give me your opinion, John, on how everything has transpired and went down in the NFL draft for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, look, I'd say really well. The thing is, you could look at it, and Loomis said this to us. Mickey Loomis, he's talking about how, you think about only 3 picks, right? And you're really stressing the quality over quantity, because I know a lot of people said they gave up how many picks to get, Troutman from the Vikings and such. So look, it was, when you look at the draft calculators, right? And if anybody doesn't know, this traces back to Jimmy Johnson in his days with the Dallas Cowboys and such, Miami Dolphins head coach, where he came up with a formula on how to evaluate all these different picks, right? And so basically, if you throw in that 3rd round pick, what they acquired to get Troutman for all their day 3 picks, that 4th, 5th, 6th, and then the 7th they picked up from the Browns, it really was a good formula, and the Saints actually came out ahead, I think, by a few points. So look, I think that's the one thing that you look at, but, we thought they would be aggressive in the draft in round 2. Didn't happen necessarily, and the Saints were patient in their approach. Look, I think we all got past the Cesar Ruiz pick, and we kind of really felt good about that one, with justifying how that goes. Never a bad thing to build that interior line. The second time with taking Zach Bond, absolutely really going to be impressed with this guy. I think he's going to fill more of that A.J. Klein role. He can rush the passer. Great things to be said by his coaches. Bobby April III, who has roots back here in New Orleans, as most of you probably remember Bobby April, special teams coach. And then Jim Leonard, another one. So that Wisconsin pipeline is really, really good and working for the Saints, right? So models a lot of his game off of T.J. Watt. That's good to see, studied behind him. So you take that and Troutman, Troutman's a guy who I think is going to be really good. He said he's been studying George Kittle and TJ Hawkinson the past 2 years. He admitted, hey, I got some things that I got to work on to get to that level. But, look, Peyton sees him as a Y tight end, inline blocker, really strong. I think he's obviously going to insert himself as the third option there easily. I think he's got some really good film ahead of him that you see. And, we talked yesterday with Coach at Dayton, and he had nothing but good things. And Coach Warner, and he had nothing but great things to say. And if you haven't checked out those stories, check them out, because he is absolutely really thrilled about it. And Troutman's a guy, he actually graduated with an electrical engineering degree, had offers from Cornell and Harvard in addition to Dayton. So this guy is really smart, and he's talking to how he studied a whole bunch of teams, seeing how they utilize tight ends, right? And so I feel good about that one. And then you got the quarterback, right? And so he's more of a developmental prospect, might be the next Taysom Hill. They can use him. I think you got to look more, not his Mississippi State film, got to look more of his Penn State film. That's where they used it. And he had ties back to Joe Brady. So it's like, the Saints, they draft these guys that, they all fit their board. They all fit for a reason. They all do their homework. And, it just goes to show you all these analysts that do this year in, year out. They don't know. They really, it's like throwing a dart at the board, and we can look, and I feel good about what this team was able to do in the draft.
Yeah, it's a real good draft. I call it mocking the mock after the draft, right? All of the pundits and analysts, they need to do this and that and the other. Nobody saw Cesar Ruiz, right? So, Bob, tell me your thoughts, man, your brief analysis of what happened with the Saints.
Well, I'll start with Bond, the third round linebacker from Wisconsin, and he, as you guys know, he was on my short list of linebackers to get for the Saints. I had him rated in the top 5, and realistically, Zach Bond had a first round grade on him by a lot of people. He slipped a little bit. Due to a couple small reasons, but the Saints, like they always do, they identify the player that they want to get, and then they move up to get him. So I think Zach Bond is going to be an immediate contributor. Now Ruiz, Cesar Ruiz, the first round pick. Look, Saints fans that were knocking it, and there were a lot of you, admit it. I know it wasn't a sexy pick, but listen, it filled a clear need that Sean Payton outlined as soon as they entered the offseason. And Ruiz is a good player. He's that versatile kind of lineman that the Saints love. He can play any of the 3 interior positions, which gives them a lot of flexibility with both he and Eric McCoy. And if you have any doubts about why the Saints went the direction that they did in the first round, pull up that film of the Minnesota playoff loss. And about a quarter and a half in, you'll realize why they made the pick that they did. Ruiz is going to be a good player for this team. And they have a very, very good track record of drafting offensive linemen early. So I don't think that we should criticize the front office or the coaching staff for making the pick that they did. Troutman was the second graded tight end on a lot of people's board, mine included. I had a different number 1 tight end than most people, but Troutman was my number 2. And there were even some mock drafts that had him projected to go in the late second round. So they get a great value here. I know they dealt a lot of picks to get him, but again, the Saints identified the player and the need that he would fit. And given the fact that Jared Cook, who is still producing at an extremely high level, is going to be a free agent, a high-priced free agent at year's end, Troutman could very quickly become a starter in this New Orleans offense. The quarterback, Tommy Stevens, I followed his career early on at Penn State. As a quarterback, he's not. But like John, like you pointed out, John, pull up the tape of him at Penn State, and you will see that throughout his Nittany Lions career, they did start to move him around a little bit just to get him on the field and get his athletic abilities into the lineup. So he very easily could fill a Taysom Hill type of role. He's not the athlete that Taysom Hill is, but he is a good athlete. I think he's willing to play special teams, and he did move around the offensive formation. And I saw a couple comments as we opened up the show. The Saints always were active in the undrafted free agent market, an area that they've had a lot of luck in throughout the Sean Payton tenure. And we'll get into that probably tonight and certainly in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, excellent, man. When you look at Troutman, I did a great article on him. And John, to echo what you were talking about in the press conference, his old Dayton Flyers coach, Chamberlain, is just an outstanding man, right? But you can tell how honored he was to be able to have Troutman as a part of his team, right? And how he just beamed with excitement and pride that this guy, after 43 years, this program finally got somebody to be an NFL draftee. And it's just awesome. And, Troutman has been with the program as a player 45 years. So, I mean, it's just awesome to hear, not Troutman, but Chamberlain, the coach. He's been with the program 45 years. It's just awesome to see what this young man can possibly bring to the Who Dat Nation. Brendan, what are your thoughts about the draft right quick?
I think I'm going to do it a little backwards, go from the last pick all the way up to the first. So kind of piggybacking off of Bob with the quarterback in Stevens, you have to throw on his Penn State tape. Very similar story to what Taysom Hill did with Sean Payton, just going up to the coach and saying, hey, I want to roll. I want to contribute. Is there a way I can play special teams or do this, that, and the other? And while he didn't play on special teams, they did create an offensive package for him that they called the Lion, quote unquote, where he lined up at receiver and running back and did a couple different things. As Bob said, not as athletic as Taysom Hill, but certainly could be the guy who transitions into that role if they feel Taysom Hill is the next guy and the next franchise quarterback of the New Orleans Saints. Looking at Troutman, Vegas oddmakers had him selected about 68.5. So to see the Saints get him at 105, basic math says, well, the Saints did pretty good. And while they did trade all of their day 3 picks, it's a guy that is going to be an immediate impact guy, whether that is in the red zone as a big target or a guy that they're able to mold into a true inline tight end. I think he's going to be really good in the coming years. And it should make some fantasy owners happy because I know fantasy football players have not been as happy with Saints tight ends over the years as of late. This might be a guy that you wait a year or two to draft, but I think he's going to be closer to that Jimmy Graham mold than Ben Watson or Jared Cook over the last few years. Bond, man, what a pick. A lot of first-round grades for this kid. When you throw on the tape, and John and I talked about it the other day, when you throw on the tape, the two things that stick out, he's explosive, his hand placement is great, the leverage he gets on tackles is fantastic, but the Saints are going to ask him to move more into an inside linebacker spot than so much as an edge rusher. So expect him to play the mic. He has great speed, sideline to sideline, but he's also going to be able to give you a couple different things on third down. He's going to be able to drop back into coverage. He's going to be able to rush the passer from some blitz packages. So a really unique player, Bond is, and he's got a lot of comparisons to Kyle Van Noy, NFL comparisons, that is. So if the Saints are able to use him in a very similar way to what the Patriots did with Kyle Van Noy, the Saints are going to be in good shape at the linebacker spot. So they get maybe the biggest need in round number 3. And then Cesar Ruiz, none of us saw that pick coming, right? Probably the biggest shock of day 1 of the NFL draft was to see the Saints take an interior offensive lineman. But the two of you before, you guys hit the nail on the head. If you pull up the tape from specifically the Minnesota Vikings playoff game, and if you even want to go back to week 2 in which Drew Brees got injured, interior pass rush was a big problem for the Saints. Obviously, there's some concern about Larry Warford and his weight and being in shape. And obviously he's getting a little bit older. I brought up in a piece that he's due to make $13 million. So if the Saints are able to either send him away and get something for him or cut him, they're going to be able to save about $8 million off the cap next year. So the pick makes a lot of sense. And the Saints have great history in first-round draft picks. And need I remind a lot of these fans, you guys didn't like the Ryan Ramczyk selection a couple years ago.
No,
I think that's turned out okay.
Brendan went hard on the fans there, Brendan. Oh, man.
Had to.
Yeah. Look, either way you go, we know we had a issue that we needed to address on the offensive line. You needed to have somebody who could be able to be versatile, take over one of those two slots, center, interior guards, whatever. It had to be done. I'm glad they got a young man. I think he's going to be highly productive. And the Saints are not making a mistake in this pick, guys. I know Patrick Queen was there. I would love to have Patrick Queen. I was kind of bewildered and I was stunned as well. But I got it, and I understand how the Saints operate and what's their philosophy. And, you guys got to understand it as well. Okay, Emily has 2 questions for the panel. Aside from the diluted sample, was there any reason Bond fell in the draft? John?
Yeah, I'd say there's 2 things there, right? As 2018 had a position change, if you will, like a coach positional change there. That was something that kind of hurt him. And at first, from my understanding, because I talked to one of the Wisconsin writers at SI, he had some issues early on, maybe I guess you could say some behavioral type issues and learning and adjusting, adapting and such. So that didn't help, obviously. And some of that it came from Vince Beagle. That's where we got that information from. He was with the Saints too. But the ankle injury, the foot injury that forced him to miss that 1 year was obviously a challenge for him. He came back and like Coach Leonard had said, and Bob April kind of echoed, it said, look, he came in here a completely different person in the summer. And that's when he started to turn it on. He was the first one in to get film studies. He's the first one to get on the practice field. I mean, he just kind of changed his entire demeanor and his entire play. So, his last couple of years is more of what you want to look at on his production. But, look, this is a guy Mel Kiper Jr. had going to New England as far as his pairing early. Again, most people had him in the first round. He fell out, and for the Saints to get him where they did is really something. It's crazy, honestly. But that would be the only things that I'd say is the 2 things that might have really helped him is the injury, and then just the fact that his first half of his career at Wisconsin wasn't the greatest. But he's really turned it on, and again, the pipeline and the ties to Wisconsin, especially with the Saints, they got all the information they needed on, and that's all that you got to trust in right now.
Yeah. Well, Kiper, man. He's different.
You're trying to scare people on here? No, I'm just kidding.
You talked about Kiper. Well, Emily, those are good questions. We're going to talk about the undrafted free agents in a little bit. And let's go to another question, guys. Everybody wants to know about Jameis. So let's take a quick Jameis one here. Jerry, talk about what do we think about the Jameis Winston signing? I know he said that a little bit earlier. Bob, what do you think about the Jameis Winston signing?
I'll tell you what, and Jerry, thank you for your question. You too, Emily, great questions. I like the Winston signing a lot. I think he fits the Saints system very well. Everybody that follows football knows the issues that Jameis Winston has had off the field, dating back to his early days at Florida State. But a lot of his teammates at Tampa Bay and the current coaching staff for the Buccaneers talked in length about the maturity that Winston has shown over the last 2 years. And he has been in some difficult situations. He had to fight for his job 2 years ago. Last year, he had to deal with a coaching change and philosophy change. And yeah, he did show surprising maturity. And I say surprising again, compared to the infamous issues, the famous Jameis has had over the previous few years. Now on the field, I think that he has a lot of potential to resurrect his career with New Orleans, be it just this 1 year audition or with another team anytime after. He has a very strong arm, good enough mobility to escape pass rushers in the pocket. He is key in some clutch situations, although he has to string that together more consistently. Remember, this is a guy that threw for 5,100 yards last year and 35 touchdowns. So he can put up the production. You look at the system and the franchise that he came from in Tampa Bay. They never provided him with a good running game. the coaching staff, if not the head coach, at least the offensive coordinator, was seemingly always in flux. So he has to learn a new system constantly, new terminology. And you ask any NFL player, let alone a quarterback, that makes a big difference in your development and your progression as a player, but especially at quarterback. I realized that Winston had very talented receivers and tight ends during his time in Tampa Bay, but they couldn't protect the quarterback. The man got sacked an average of about 40 to 45 times a year whenever he played a full season. While I'm attributing some of that to his high amount of interceptions, and that certainly needs to be addressed, any quarterback is going to make mistakes or increase the number of mistakes that they make when they're put under pressure. That's one of the reasons why defenses design so many of these different pressure packages.
Right.
So Jameis is going to have a running game with New Orleans, assuming he has an opportunity to get on the field. Winston's going to have a running game with the Saints, and he's going to have an offensive line in front of him that protects the quarterback as well as any team in the league. That is going to make a big difference. He's going to love throwing to Michael Thomas and Jared Cook and now Emmanuel Sanders as well. He's not had this kind of offensive system during his 5-year career so far. And the plan for Jameis, obviously, if all things go according to plan, Drew Brees is going to play all 16 games, 2 playoff games in the Super Bowl, and Jameis is not going to see the field unless it's in mop-up duty. But as we saw last year, this doesn't always go according to plan. The New Orleans Saints wanted an experienced starter as the backup to Drew Brees as a just-in-case. And having Winston there is going to give Taysom Hill an opportunity to do what Taysom Hill does best, and that is play a versatile role: running back, H-back, blocker, gimmick quarterback, wide receiver, tight end. Anything that Taysom Hill has been asked to do, he's done it well.
Right.
And his best role for the New Orleans Saints is the role that he has played the last 2 years. And having a viable starter as an option behind Drew Brees allows Taysom Hill to do that in this offense. So that's the strategy behind it.
Yeah. Well, look, man, it is what it is, guys. And John and Brendan, if you guys disagree with what I'm about to say, let me know. He's just an insurance policy. Can you hear me?
No, I was leaning in real close to see what you were saying.
He's an insurance policy, guys, and that's the bottom line. Taysom Hill is going to be what? Number 2, right? They're not paying this guy $21 million to not be something for the New Orleans Saints, right? He has a very good contract. That's great. Jameis Winston can benefit a lot of different ways. Just sitting in the quarterback room, learning from Drew Brees, Sean Payton, man, that's enough for him to be able to resurrect his career right there. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be like Teddy Bridgewater, but it's a similar type of deal that we had with Bridgewater that we have here with Winston. Okay? So, guys, do not jump off the Crescent City connection. He's not taking over Drew Brees' job, and he's not the heir apparent to Drew Brees. Okay? So we got here Jerry. He says, I just hate Winston. Just saying. We got Robert here. Winston is garbage. Ooh, that's kind of strong, right? Brendan, do you think he's garbage?
No, I think what you said has a lot of value to it, right? He's not the heir apparent. It's an insurance policy. You could even call it an addition if the Saints make it a little bit of a competition between him and Hill in the following years. The biggest thing about Jameis and the biggest knock he's going to get are the interceptions. And Bob alluded to it, and it's something we've talked about on why we feel the New Orleans Saints are still the favorite here in the NFC South, and why the Buccaneers should not be nearly as feared as some media outlets are putting it, is because they still don't have a run game and they don't have an offensive line. And the running game is a quarterback's best friend. And as Bob alluded to, Winston's been sacked a lot in his young NFL career. Let's not forget, when Winston was at Florida State, they go on and they win the BCS national championship, right? You look at the talent he had on that team and how many NFL players were on that Florida State team. And you can see why Jameis was the Heisman Trophy winner. You can see the levels of talent. You can see the unreal arm strength of Jameis Winston. He has just not had enough opportunities and enough weapons around him to show it in the NFL consistently. Remember, he was a 2015 Pro Bowl selection as well. So fans, let's not freak out too much. You know, he's going to be an insurance policy. It's going to be, like Kyle said, similar to Teddy Bridgewater, where you're going to do this to allow Taysom Hill to do what Taysom Hill does. Look at the games in which Drew Brees missed last season and Teddy Bridgewater started going 5-0. Yes, the Saints were winning football games, but we saw less and less of Taysom Hill on offense and even on special teams. You can look at the numbers. The percentages went down tremendously, the amount of snaps that he played. So having that third quarterback, and something Sean Payton has talked about all offseason, having that third quarterback that is active on Sundays allows Taysom Hill to be the jack of all saints, and that's what we're looking for.
All right. John Smith says franchise quarterbacks do not grow on trees.
No, they sure don't. And here's what I'll tell you about Jameis Winston, right? A few points I'd like to make. First of all, he's been through 3 different head coaches. So you had Lovie Smith his rookie year. Second year, he had Dirk Cotter for a while. Then last year, he had Bruce Arians. Oh, by the way, I was reading something earlier, but in the years Bruce Arians had quarterbacks, I think it was Carson Palmer, him, and Winston, and then one other I'm trying to remember, Andrew Luck. They had most turnovers of their career and such in those. So maybe it's a difference in that. That's the first thing I'd say. Second thing is based off of his turnovers. You know, Winston said, I mean, I know we make fun of, right, his vision, he squints and all that. He had LASIK to clean that up, but he doesn't attribute the turnovers to his vision whatsoever. I think with him, again, you're looking at a player who's making the best decision he can make for himself, because he's going to come in here, he's going to learn from Drew Brees, he's going to learn from Taysom Hill. He's not only those two. Sean Payton is a quarterback guy, right? Joe Lombardi, you got Pete Carmichael. Those guys are very smart. So, look, anytime I would tell you that Taysom Hill's learned so much. I know people are saying, oh, he's only thrown, 6 passes in his career, 7 passes. But, again, being at training camp, seeing where Taysom Hill was at the beginning to where he is now is just leaps and bounds. He's better in his progression. He's better in his reads. He's better with his decision-making, just everything about it. And that's what the Saints have done for him, and especially being around a guy like Drew Brees. So if I'm Jameis Winston and if I'm the Saints, because Sean Payton said this at the beginning of the month, saying, hey, look, our next quarterback, we're going to have, first of all, on the roster starting on game days. And secondly, he's going to be somebody that we feel like can come in here and develop and learn and all this other such. So, look, I think Jameis Winston is a guy who needs the Saints right now, obviously probably more than New Orleans needs him. I think he has a chance to revitalize and rejuvenate his career.
Good point.
At this point. Now, that's not saying he can't become a franchise quarterback from somebody, but if you're coming in here on a 1-year deal and you're not going to get a lot of sample size on it, that's not a guarantee that you're going to be the next guy. But I tell you, Taysom Hill getting that 2-year deal done today when it was announced, that's something they've been working on for months. And again, he said it pretty clearly when he talked to us, on the Zoom call, saying, hey, look, this is the year I'm looking to come in here and prove that I'm the guy to take over when Drew Brees is gone. If that doesn't happen, he says, and Drew plays another year, he said, I'll be behind him again. He said, I'll be behind him as long as it takes. But, at the same time, that's why he did a 2-year deal to not become a free agent next season, and we have to do all this over again. So, look, maybe Winston pans out, maybe not. Only time's going to tell. But, it's going to be really upon him. I'll say this, too, is the Saints aren't having a spring offseason program, so they're only going to get back to when it's training camp. So he's going to have to be self-disciplined to put in the work, to start learning the playbook, to start learning how things go, because I'm telling you, when all these people, all these players get here, the new ones, they're going to be in for a wake-up call, because this is going to be an intense training camp, and you're only going to have a short time to put it together, whereas, you typically have 3-4 months. Now you only have 1 or 2.
Yeah, they're going to have to hit the ground running, bottom line. It's not going to be, we got OTAs, we got mini camps, we got rookie camps, none of that. You've got to be able to hit the ground running. You have to be able to get yourself still, maintain your workouts, and get yourself in shape and ready for what's going to happen this summer. Now, Jessica says, Bob, let's not forget, what else that Jameis did when he was at Florida State. He's not a good person and no longer a good player either. What do you think about that?
Jessica, some of the maturity things that I mentioned on a general scale, I did have his transgressions at Florida State in mind when I said them. Listen, some of the things that he has been accused of are downright reprehensible. I'll just say it. I hope that he has put those off-season issues behind him, or off the field issues behind him, excuse me. Because if he doesn't, a stunt or two, while he's under contract with the New Orleans Saints, and he won't be under contract with the New Orleans Saints anymore. Like John pointed out, Jameis Winston needs the New Orleans Saints much more than the New Orleans Saints need Jameis Winston. This is a luxury pickup as a player. And while it makes a lot of sense, and he could be valuable to the franchise, Jameis needs this. And I hope for that young man's sake that he's intelligent and mature enough to recognize that he needs this. And listen, we all did stupid things when we were younger, some of us worse than others. I'm not excusing what he did by any stretch at all. And he probably should have been punished more severely than what he was. I think a 2-game suspension, one of his seasons with the Seminoles, and a 3 or 4 game suspension a couple years ago with the NFL. We don't know the legalities, the specific legalities behind some of those things, both at Florida State and the NFL. And I'm not a lawyer, and I don't have the knowledge deep enough to speak in more specifics about it. I just hope that for his sake and for the sake of the New Orleans Saints, that he has put that behind him.
Okay. All right. Aaron Davis, Florida in general is not known for birthing mature players, college or pro. When you look at the locker room, our staff, and you feel something special. Winston passed up a lucrative deal with the Steelers to be with us. It's really safe to say that right now he is humbled. Yeah, that's safe to say, guys. And I have to
you and I spoke about it this morning too. Jameis Winston is not coming to the New Orleans Saints to be the leader or the starting quarterback. And that locker room is just so strong with character guys, not just the leadership at the top. I mean, that's well known with Breeze, Peyton, Demario Davis, Teron Armstead, etc. But and now Malcolm Jenkins is back too. Just the entire team is full of character, high quality guys. Have they been perfect throughout their lives? Most of them, I doubt it, because again, we've all made mistakes in our life. But one of the things that turned this team around from the 2014 debacle that we saw on the field and heard about in the locker rooms are the type of guys that they started to bring in to turn this culture around. And there isn't going to be one player, let alone a backup player at that, to come in and really put much of a dent in that, even if he is still a knucklehead.
All right, good stuff, guys. Let's get off with Jameis Winston for the time being. Let's talk about some undrafted free agents, John and Brendan and Bob. Man, I'm excited about these guys, John. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. I think a couple in particular is Marquez Callaway's first one, and I think it leaps off the page. Juwan Johnson, wide receiver from Oregon. That's a guy that probably could have easily been drafted. Those are probably the two I'm most excited about, especially given the nature of the competition. The offensive line don't really surprise me. Kevin Washington is one I've been hearing about for quite some time now, that, he's defensive back out of West Virginia. They gave him a pretty good guarantee to be with the team, but, the Saints had plenty of contact with him, had a couple of virtual meetings. They were hoping that, he would come to him. So, I don't know what'll end up being made, but I think if I had to pick, Juwan Johnson's got to be my favorite one. And then the running back from Notre Dame, it was Tony Jones Jr.
Yeah, Tony Jones. So, I like him, man.
So you guys know, and Malcolm Roach is another one, defensive tackle from Texas. That is another one that they could find probably like last year's shy total. So that would be interesting to see. But, they got a whole bunch of them. I wouldn't make so much about the punter they brought in. But look, Sean Payton said it yesterday, I think on the draft-a-thon, saying, hey, look, we're looking for the next Pierre Thomas always. Their track history with undrafted free agents. Deontay Harris last year, Shy Tuttle, JT Gray was a special teamster guy, Justin Hardy, a special teams guy. I mean, Caden Ellis was a late round draft pick, but he was one that could have been an undrafted guy at some point too. But, just these guys that you get in the building that are able to do a lot of these things, it's pretty unique how it all falls. But look, it's special, but those are the ones that I'm really excited about.
Yeah. What about you, Brendan? Which ones kind of get you juiced up?
I think it's right there on your screen. Callaway from Tennessee to grab that guy as a wideout, as an undrafted free agent, a guy that could have very well gone in the 7th round, I think is really important. And I know a lot of Saints fans are questioning, well, why didn't they address wide receiver within the draft? They bring in 2 really good ones. John referenced the other from Oregon, an opportunity for one of those guys to make the team. Let's not forget, as John alluded to, the success that this team has had with undrafted free agents is unparalleled at any other team in the league. John named off a few. Obviously, Harris was a Pro Bowl return man in his first season, undrafted free agent. If you want to talk about even guys that were just contributing players during their time in New Orleans, you can look at guys like Brandon Coleman, Junior Gillette, Jolon Dunbar, all those guys undrafted free agents. And though maybe not superstar potential, maybe not a guy that really sticks out when you think of New Orleans Saints over the years, guys that really gave the Saints something on the field on Sundays and were productive. And who could forget the 2 Super Bowl champions and Saints Hall of Famer and Pierre Thomas, and then Lance Moore as well. This team knows what they're doing. They bring in a lot of different guys. And like I said, I think for me, the receiver out of Tennessee and Callaway, he's the one to really watch out for in training camp.
They brought in a couple of guys from Oregon, Bob. What are your thoughts about those Ducks?
Well, I am shocked that Calvin Throckmorton didn't get drafted, the offensive lineman from Oregon. Again, he shows that kind of versatility that the Saints love in their offensive lineman. He played tackle at Oregon. Excelled at guard, which is where I think he projects to best in the pros, and even played a little bit of center. He's not the most fleet of foot, and his footwork needs some work, which is why I think he probably dropped so much in the draft. But he is a mammoth of a man, and he, along with McGee from LSU and a couple other of those interior linemen that they signed, there's going to be a lot of competition at those spots along the New Orleans offensive line. But as far as the other guy, I'm interested to see Gus Cumberlander on the field, and I hope I said his name remotely correct. Gus suffered a knee injury last year and missed the majority of the season. But he's an edge rusher with some potential. Kind of a tweener guy. He's not going to be a cover guy at outside linebacker, but he's not going to be a defensive end on rundowns either. So he's going to have to work his way into position, probably earn a spot on special teams, as a lot of these undrafted guys do. But we've seen the Saints have some success in the last couple of years with undrafted free agents along the defensive line too. Certainly Shy Tuttle and Carl Granderson last year, Taylor Stallworth the year before that. So these guys are going to have, and Sean Payton said it before too, kind of patting himself on the back when he says it, but he truly believes that his organization gives undrafted free agents a better shot or more of an opportunity to make the squad than the average NFL team. And you can't argue with the results that he's correct.
Yeah. Guys, what about this kid, AJ Green or Lamar Jackson? What happened there? Did we have a play on them, John?
Not that I know of. I mean, there was another one, wide receiver. Name eludes me. He's one they originally chose the Cowboys, then the Vikings, and I'm going brain dead right now. But no, it's not that they didn't have necessarily interest. I mean, there's a lot of different ones that they could look at, and I mean, and Sean Payton kind of explained this process, right? And that's one of the beauties of them not necessarily having a pick yesterday, is they were able to sit there with literally a stack of people that they had as far as prioritized undrafted free agents, and then a lot goes into that. That hey, you're talking about guys that get larger contract offers than others, and that's super important this time of year. So other people probably had more guaranteed money to throw at other ones, or were willing to have for more guaranteed on their deals, because obviously this could be the only shot that they get. So, but nothing that I heard particular out of any of those.
Okay. And let's see. They keep asking about Bocce. Brendan, anything on him?
I'll pass that up to the other two.
Clark is a good sideline to sideline linebacker. Very good in zone coverage. A little bit limited. It's not that he doesn't have the foot speed to run with tight ends down the field, but he's a little bit tight-hipped and doesn't react greatly to change of direction. But he is a naturally instinctive run defender and a tackle machine for Michigan State. He moves laterally very well, pursues sideline to sideline very well, and has very good gap recognition to step in and make a play.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say with him, he just one of the things I think is his PED test he failed at. I think that's what ended up dropping, because I think he was a 5th or 6th round pick, if I'm not mistaken, 3-year starter, captain, all these different things. So they may have something in him. I mean, there's a lot of linebacker competition that's needed. So a guy like him has just as good a chance to make the roster as anybody. So we'll see what ultimately happens. But that's, I think, some of the reasons why he probably fell.
Okay, Aaron. Lamar Jackson is pretty okay. We need a lockdown corner. Okay. Keith Washington of WVU. Anybody know about Keith?
What I saw when I looked at him is he has good instincts, good traits. Again, he's I think more of a hybrid. I think, with what you're looking at on his film. So, I mean, he's great tackling in the open space. He's got good reads on him. So, look, I think here, obviously, with any of these undrafted free agents, most of them, their bread and butter is going to have to be on special teams. So I think that's where you're probably looking at somebody where he's able to come in. I think he could potentially play, cornerback is more where I see him, not necessarily safety, but I think he's got some of those traits and instincts that, you really like to see on film, and not a guy that was really talked about. But again, the Saints were very interested in him. He graded out really well in Pro Football Focus playing against deep balls and such. So, again, he's one that you're going to have to keep an eye on. And again, another example of a spot where cornerback, past Janoris Jenkins and Marshawn Lattimore, it's Patrick Robinson and technically PJ Williams, but there's a lot of ways to rise up the depth chart pretty easily with the Saints.
Right. Now, a lot of people still are kind of in a uproar. Their Saints did not select a wide receiver. How do you address that, Brendan?
Well, I think the big thing that the Saints fans can't forget is Traquan Smith. And I know a lot of last season he disappeared. He obviously had the big games his rookie year against Washington and Philadelphia. But let's not forget he had 5 touchdown receptions last year. It's going to be a big make-or-break year for him. But I think we addressed it. There's a couple guys, undrafted free agents that the Saints have brought in that could fight for a role just as much as anybody else. They also brought back Tommy Lee Lewis. So there's options. And though there might not be big options or guys that were first, second, third round picks, the Saints have options there. And as we all know, Drew Brees has made good receivers out of just about anybody that can catch a football. So I wouldn't be shocked to see the Saints give an opportunity to some of these younger guys and see who can just come in and plug and play.
Okay. Anybody can tell us a little bit about Tino Ellis?
I can't. I didn't have a chance to see if I could dig up any film on him earlier. I didn't have an opportunity. Even when going to our cheat sheet, Mike Detillier's draft guide, he has Tino listed among other players to watch, where he just has his name, his school, height, weight, and 40 time, but no description. I'll have to take a pass on that one. I do like Keith Washington, though, like you were saying, John. I see a lot of good things out of him.
Yeah, I'll say this on him. Ellis, Maryland football, he kind of had an injury. So he only had, I think, a handful of games that he played from what I remember. I can't remember specifics on what Pro Football Focus was able to dig up, but definitely look at more of a true cornerback. I mean, he had a much better year as a junior in 2018. 2017, he had, was just kind of getting his feet wet, but 2018, I think he started all of his games at cornerback for me. And so I mean, you gotta just again wait and see what happens with them. Again, that side of the coin, you just really don't know what you're going to get with some of these. And of course, here's what I'll tell anybody: for any of these undrafted guys, we're going to be looking heavily into them and doing profiles on them. So we'll dig up all the dirt and find out what we can and make sure that you guys know for sure.
Yeah, and think about the connection also. The new assistant defensive backfield coach comes from where? Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
That's how this kid got here, guys. He must know him very well, must know what he's able to do for the program. All right, let's see here. If you guys would like to ask a direct question by telephone, you can call in at 504-533-8444 to ask any of the panelists the question. Okay. Stacy, good night. Good night, Stacy. Who that?
Good night, Hoos.
All right, John Smith. I was hoping the Saints would sign tight end out of Washington, Hunter Bryant. Anybody knows anything about Hunter?
He's I did actually do a mini film study on him just to get some background at the tight end position. Bryant isn't much of a blocker. He does have a good receiving ability downfield and excellent athleticism for the position. But he needs to add some weight, get stronger at the point of attack, and come off of the line in his routes better as an inline tight end, to be able to contribute to an NFL offense. Because as a receiver, he doesn't have the foot speed or the agility in his routes to convert over into a bigger wide receiver. So he's just kind of a tweener with no home right now. I like, and I think you guys alluded to this earlier tonight too. I like their addition with Troutman at tight end, and I think that this kid is one heck of a player. I know that there's not a lot of film on him from Dayton, but study the stuff that you can bring up and watch, and you're gonna see that the Saints got themselves a player.
Yeah, definitely. We're going back to the wide receivers. So John is talking about Lil Jordan Humphrey as well as Emmanuel Butler. We kind of forget that Emmanuel Butler was a training camp darling, right, John?
Yeah, camp champ is what I like to say. Again, it's just one of those examples. Reminds me of Corey Fuller the year before, right? I mean, you just get these guys that when you see them, they stand out in practice. And again, I like to see people stand out in practice, but I've always been in the old adage that I want to see it in the preseason, right? And so I thought Lil Jordan Humphrey was another guy. He did some things in practice, but when it came down to the preseason games, he just didn't do it. I mean, missed catches. Maybe some of it was nerves. Same thing with Emmanuel Butler. But again, you look at some of these players that they bring in. I mean, that's it. Again, you can't put all your stock into what you see in practice, because I remember those years in, was it 2012 or 2014, 2015 for sure, that everybody was ranting and raving and praising how good the defense looked in practice, how much they irritated and PO'd Drew Brees, but that defense didn't show up. That wasn't what we got. So, look, I think Butler's still got a long way. Maurice Harris is probably a dark horse I'd look at for sure. And I think it's Tim White is another one that you want to look at too. So, between that and I see Deontay Harris is popping up potentially. I mean, yeah, that's another one to even think of. So, look, I don't rule out the fact that they could also bring in another free agent in this whole process and really mix it up. They've done it in the past. They've tried in the past, but it's going to be a interesting uphill battle. But I feel better about them bringing in guys like Troutman as another wide receiving threat and a full healthy Alvin Kamara and that guy Emmanuel Sanders they picked up. I think that's really good for them.
Oh, good stuff, guys. All right, Brendan, we're about to wrap up in a few minutes. Let's go back to the Saints not addressing linebacker as far as a top tier type of guy in the draft. Is that a mistake?
I don't think so. We've talked about it, the 3-4 of us before. You have some linebackers coming back. Obviously, the concern is their health. Alex Anzalone, a guy that just stands out perfectly on film when he's healthy for the New Orleans Saints. You're just crossing your fingers if you're a fan, saying, I hope he can come back healthy and well and actually put together a 16-game season, because when he has played, he's really stood out for the Saints. I know you guys like Ellis, the 6th or 7th round pick from last season, but he had an injury as well at the linebacking spot. So I think there's a lot of guys that can compete. We can't forget about Kiko Alonso. So there's a lot of guys on the roster that almost get forgotten about or split by the heads of people just because they're injured or have been injured throughout last season. So there's a lot of guys in that linebacking room that could make an immediate impact for the Saints defense. And the same thing, Kyle, is we talked about Bond. He had a 1st-round grade for a lot of people. So though you don't select him very high, you do have to take into consideration the type of grade that he carried. And I believe that he's going to be playing at the Mike spot for New Orleans, and he's going to be a big difference maker for the Saints next year.
Yeah, I like the kid. I like what he brings to the table. Listening to him, you got to really think that the Saints, in my opinion, John, you've been on the press conferences as well. Seems like these guys are the top 3 guys are very smart guys.
Yeah, I'd say intelligence is the first thing that sticks out to him. I mean, and that's, again, go back to the fact that the Saints aren't going to have a spring offseason program. I mean, you're getting 3 very intelligent guys. What I think Ruiz stressed is he likes to be the guy in charge, right? I mean, he's the one that makes all the calls, pre-snap reads, all that stuff. That's what he did at Michigan for years. And so, I mean, you can see that, and really you don't want somebody in here, a rookie, especially if you're expecting them to come in and you don't draft them to be a backup, to push somebody like Larry Warford. And again, the verdict's still out because they could very well put Ruiz at center and put McCoy over at guard if they wanted to. I mean, it's really up to them. And those are things they're going to figure out in training camp, obviously. So between that, and then again, I mentioned Troutman, he's an electrical engineer. That's what he graduated with. This guy is just, he described himself. He said he's a football junkie. So he watched a lot of film on tape. He's an interesting guy to look at. And then with Bond, I mean, look, you had Jim Leonard there. Obviously he played football a while. Bobby April III is a big Saints fan. The pipeline's there. And Bond had the luxury of all the Wisconsin defenders that came before him, like TJ Watt was one of them, Vince Beagle, any of these guys that were able to really help him along. So I think a lot of that came in to a reasoning why they drafted the guys that they did. And so I think they'll have, not so much of a learning curve when they get to training camp.
Yeah. Good guys coming from good programs as well. Bob, take this one from John here. He says, any information on Tim White or Taquan Mizzell and Maurice Harris?
John, that's a great question, and thank you for it. Tim White, I know very, very little about. Maurice Harris, John spoke. John HENDRIX spoke of a minute ago. Maurice Harris is going to have an opportunity to compete for a wideout position. With a handful of other, former undrafted free agents, and then the 2 that they brought in this year. Mizzell is going to have an opportunity to compete at running back, though. And having seen a little bit of him in the past, as other Saints fans have, Mizzell has. I like the burst that he has in the open field when he gets the ball in his hands. In my opinion, he hits the line of scrimmage a little bit too upright and doesn't show great vision. But again, when you have an offensive line like the New Orleans Saints are going to have in front of them, that is a running back. We talked about it being a quarterback's best friend. It's a running back's best friend too. This team behind Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray, there is going to be an opportunity to make this team for these guys. I see, Aaron asking about Tony Jones Jr. out of Notre Dame, who I think is a back with a lot of potential too, one of the undrafted guys. They're going to have an opportunity to compete with Dwayne Washington. And Dwayne isn't going to be easy to knock off of that perch because, he has been productive in limited snaps at running back, and he's been one heck of a special teams player as well. But Mizzell and Tony Jones, this year are going to have an opportunity to compete. And, we have seen Sean Payton have an open mind when it comes to unheralded running backs coming in and winning a job.
Yeah. Good question. Got 2 more before we get off. Well, it's more like a comment from Flutch here. It's about Teddy was a second string when he came to New Orleans, and good thing Winston. Okay. I guess what you're saying, Fletch, is people need to stop thinking about his past and kind of key in on the positives of what he can be able to bring to the Saints organization, right?
Well, and I would tell you, I mean, again, it's not dismissing or downplaying anything, right? Because Carl Granderson is a prime example of what happened last year. He had to, serve some jail time, right? And yeah, that was a thing within itself, and that's one thing you want to get off in the rabbit hole. So, I mean, I would tell you that this Saints locker room is really, completely changed from years ago. And I mean, again, without getting too much into it, they get a lot of guys that believe in the same types of things. These are guys who are not, me first people. These are really, the culture here is just outstanding. And, again, people do things in the past. I mean, I've done things I've regretted personally. And again, context is everything. But again, you got to look at all of that relative to what we're trying to accomplish. And again, some stuff you can't forget. You can obviously forgive, but I think that, part of that deep dive into people's backstory, background, and history is part of the scouting process. So I think that's something that the Saints know about and are prepared to deal with if it comes up.
Yeah, definitely. And Paul T says, how can a scout determine when you are successful at a school in Dayton, and will it transfer to the NFL? That's a good question, Paul. Let me take this a little bit, and Brendan, you can help me out. But not only did they do the scouting on this young man, people met with him, got to know him a little bit, and the scouting process is not just for 1 year. Scouting process is for a couple of years, and this guy has been on the radar for many different teams. I know the coach talked about what the Ravens was one, right, John?
Steelers, Colts, a whole bunch.
Yeah, Raiders, and these guys come in and they talk to the coaches, they get to meet the players, they get to know the players, they get to know who they are, and they're on their radar not just for one time. Sometimes those scouts go to multiple games that these guys have played in throughout the years. So also he got a special invitation to the Senior Bowl, and he excelled at the Senior Bowl. So that means he was under competition with some of the guys that have been drafted, and he did a very, very good job. So you got a guy who has a bachelor's in electrical engineering, and I know I have my degree in chemistry, so electrical engineering ain't too shabby either. So the guy is a smart kid, and he still was playing football at the same time he obtained his degree. I don't know how he did it, but that's
basketball too. He played basketball too. We can't forget that.
Right. So good footwork. He's athletic, and he can be able to handle the rigors of the NFL, in my opinion. All right, Fletch, I guess we answered your question, so good to know. All right, any last comments, John and Bob and Brendan, before we get off the air?
Well, look, I mean, this is Saints. I feel like they've dominated the headlines. They dominated social media today with everything that's come out. But, look, I would just say get ready and strap in, because now we got the excitement of the draft over with. It's going to be kind of boring because, again, the Saints aren't having a spring offseason program. The next thing that we have to look forward to is the NFL schedule. I'm interested to see what happens. I don't know if it's a reduced schedule. I don't know if they're pushing games back, but that's something that we're going to pay attention and be all over. I think it's supposed to drop no later than May 9th. So, in the meantime, we're going to get you through it as much as we can, as best as we can, through some of these undrafted profiles. And obviously there's a lot that'll go into it and such. I'm sure when we get to talk to Jameis Winston, when that does get announced on Monday. And just so everybody knows, they're supposed to announce that tomorrow to help with the comp pick formula to make sure that the Saints don't have to, or that there's no comp pick involved with the deal that they give Winston. So they also would be able to get the sixth round projected pick for AJ Klein that was signed with Buffalo. So they should get 2 compensatory picks out of this. But again, staying with us, and we appreciate all the support, and thanks for everything that you guys do.
And John, that's great point. We don't know what's going to happen. How they sign Winston does affect those compensatory picks. Good point. And let's see here. How you doing, Will?
Say wave.
Will is a future analyst, guys. I just want to let you guys know that. All right. It's going to be a great season. Yes, Jared, it will be a great season. Thank you for your comment. All right. And let me quickly get your grades. Each one of you guys grading the New Orleans Saints in the 2020 NFL draft. Quickly, A, B, C, D. John, grade.
I'll go with a B minus.
B minus. Bobo.
B minus.
B minus as well. What about you, Brent?
Man, I'm the optimistic one. In the piece I wrote today that came out, I gave it an A minus. I thought the first 3 picks were all excellent picks, especially since they were all in the top 40 on the Saints draft board. I think, like Bob said a little bit earlier, when the Saints know that they want a guy, they find a way to go up and get him. And I think all 3 were really good. I wanted to comment just a little bit on the process of scouting, especially at a smaller school real quick. When it comes to things like that, when you're looking at film and you're watching these guys live on Saturdays, the biggest things you want to look for aren't necessarily the stats, because a lot of times these guys either fill up the stat sheet or they look like an average football player. You're looking, especially at a tight end, you're looking at hand placement, you're looking at release from the line, you're looking at things like that. Scouts are there every single day, like to Kyle's point. Every Saturday, more schools than not have at least 2 NFL scouts there. That's coming from someone who works at a small FCS school as well. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, and those guys don't get enough attention, but there's a lot of really quality guys at small schools like that. But you're really just looking for fundamentals and seeing how they carry themselves, especially sometimes with these guys knowing they're the very best player on their team.
Right. And I've got to say, we've got to trust in this guy.
You're just picking the goofiest.
Oh my God! I was just saying,
Yeah.
Sean ever tunes in, he's gonna be like, "What in the world?"
Yeah, trust in this guy.
Not that he's doing.
All right.
Well, I was gonna say something real quick, just to.
Go
I
ahead.
say B minus on the draft just because of the last pick that they made. I felt like maybe they could have got him as an undrafted guy, but Sean said that there was a lot of teams interested, so I get it. Basically, you traded up 6th rounder, next year. They're going to get that back in a compensatory pick. Presumably, that's the only reason why I would say B plus, hovering close to A minus territory. But that's the only reason why I gave it a B minus before everybody gets upset.
Yeah, and when he was talking to us in the press conference, right? It was something about Stevens that I know they have a vision for it. They want to use him in one way, shape, or form, right? So that led them to go aggressively and do what they did for him and try to get him. Okay, John, you said your picks B plus. Okay. All right.
I can agree with B plus. Trust me. I just dropped it a little bit, like I said, because of the last pick. So that's. Okay. But I can see it. But I think he's also going to be one that we don't see that might not make the roster. He'll go on the red shirt practice squad. Let's put it that way.
Right. It could be a scout guy, right? So Ruiz is a starter, Troutman number 2, and Bond is a stud at linebacker. All right, John. Guys, we appreciate all of your comments. Paul T, John, and we had some Flutch and Jared and Aaron and oh man,
Emily, Jerry, a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, basically, you were funny. So yeah, we had some good comments. DJ, let's see. Yeah, DJ, we did get to you and Calvin as well. All right, guys. John, Bob, Brendan, my overall grade was an A, just an A until that last pick. And I have to go B minus as well, if we have to do overall. If we stuck with the first 3, it was going to be an A. So, all right, guys. I appreciate everything that you guys are doing. Don't forget, you can be able to follow us online at si.com/NFL/Saints for all the latest in New Orleans Saints news and updates on the team. You can follow John. How can they follow you on the World Wide Web, John?
Yeah, just go to at John J. Hendrix. It's Hendrix, just like Jimmy, just like you see it spelled.
All right. And Bob, how can they follow you?
First of all, thank you for everybody that's tuned in tonight. Thank you for all those that were hanging with us through the draft. Paul T, you were a trooper. Love you all, but special love for you, Paul T. As far as me, I can be followed on Facebook, Bob Rose, or Twitter at BobbyR2613. In addition to my works, all of our works at the Saints News Network and SI.com.
All right. And Brendan Boylan, how can they follow you, sir?
Real easy. Everything's the same. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. It's at BTBOYLAN. And to Bob, what he's just said, thank you guys for all hanging out throughout the week. I know it was really tiring for us, so I'm sure it was tiring for you guys to put up with us as well. I'll shout out John Smith. I've seen you the last couple of days. So really thank all of you for hanging out. And we're really looking forward to giving you guys some fun content, whether it's undrafted free agents, some more draft analysis, and going all the way into training camp.
Yeah. And guys, do not forget, you can follow us at Saints News on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now TikTok. Well, at TikTok, it's at Saints News Network. And you can follow me at KTMOZE. That's KT Moles on Twitter. This is Kyle T. Mosley. All right, Paul T. Paul T is a fan of yours, Bob. He loves you, man. And yeah, you be safe as well. Paul
I'm glad
T.
someone does.
Paul T. Bob is the prettiest one of all of us. That's what he says. All right. You can follow us on www.si.com/NFL/Saints. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, John. Thank you, Bob. And thank you, fans. You guys have a great one. Who Dat Nation? We are out. Who Dat, baby? Take care. Yeah. Bye-bye.